Evening. Welcome to Terrorism and Political Violence, Week 4. I have to apologize for not getting back to you last week or having been a little bit behind, but as most of you know, we had the baby 2 weeks ago, and just trying to get back into the swing of things. And for the parents out there, they know that the first 2 weeks tend to be a little crazy. And this was kind of compounded by the fact that my wife had a C-section, so I've been taking care of wife and baby for the last couple of weeks, so it's been crazy. Pretty crazy here. Appreciate the notes people sent. I apologize again for getting a little bit behind on some of the grading, but I just wanted to check in and just say you should all have your grades for week 2 for the papers. The exams will be graded this week. You should have the grades in for the discussion section for week 2 as well. I'm actually pretty happy with the discussion sections. I think we're kind of hitting the points that we need to, and the grades reflect that. Week 3 will be graded this week when I get to it, and all 3 exams will be graded this week. For your papers, I just want to say is how you write is critical. Clarity is vital. In this business, it's much more important to get your point across and to be clear about it than to have the most brilliant idea out there and not be able to write it cogently. So any chance you get to improve your writing, take it. Writing is your critical skill that everyone needs to master. For your writing, for some of the papers, I noticed a disturbing pattern is you went into the history. Your 5-page paper, 3 to 4 pages were dedicated to just historical analysis. That's going to turn off your reader. The point is to have a little bit of history, but then to talk about objectives, strategy, tactics of the group that you chose. And just kind of an example. Imagine the events of the past week. The Libyan or the ambassador of Libya getting killed by a Al-Qaeda offshoot in Libya. Your boss doesn't know anything about this, and he turns to you and he says, "Give me a 5-page summary so I could take to senior leadership on this Al-Qaeda in Libya group that caused the death." So you're not going to write a 5-page history paper. You're going to talk a little bit of background, a little bit of history, then what's the so what? What's the strategy of this group? Why do they do what they need to do? What are the tactics? Is it a future problem? So that's kind of where we're going with the papers. For future, just get into the dynamics of the group. Wasn't really asked for this week, but for future papers it will. So someone wrote a paper on Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb. One of the key dynamics is why do they shift away from just targeting military targets to civilians? Why did they do that? Was there an internal strife within the group? Were they forced to do it? Was there a leadership secession that caused this change in tactics? So those are kind of the questions to understand is why a group would pursue a certain course of action. How does a group, and some of you alluded to this, how does a group go from a terrorist organization to a political organization? And for those of you who talked about the PLO and Tamil Tigers and such, that's another key dynamic to talk about. What were the characteristics of the leadership? What were the characteristics of the group that allowed it to become a political organization? Or why didn't it succeed, or why did it fail to become a political organization? Again, those are just some of the thoughts that are going to come up in the future papers. So I think I kind of hit the papers enough. If you have any questions, please let me know. I think I covered a lot of that in your comments as well. I just want to go back a couple of weeks. Week 2 questions, rise of Al-Qaeda, why? And I think a lot of you hit this pretty well. There's kind of 4 arguments that most of you came up with, and the first one, as most people think, is why did Al-Qaeda rise before 9/11? And it has much to do with the poor governments in Saudi Arabia and Egypt and other countries in the Middle East. These autocracies that didn't allow democracies, that suppressed Islamic viewpoints, and that caused Al-Qaeda to kind of rebel. And I think most of you pretty much said that. The second reason for the rise of Al-Qaeda, again, prior to 9/11, is the actual Afghan War in 1979, or that started in 1979. I think that's what and some of you alluded to this, that's what made Al-Qaeda go from just this regional anti-government organizations in Egypt and Algeria, etc., to a global jihad. You had all these people coming in from all over the world, coming to Afghanistan, associating, rubbing elbows, and then they go back to their home countries, but they're still in touch. And that's kind of the second major reason for the rise of Al-Qaeda. The third thing, and some of you alluded to this, is U.S. policies. Whether they're right or wrong, U.S. support to Saudi Arabia and Egypt kind of gave an excuse for Osama bin Laden to attack the United States as the far enemy. If the near enemy was Egypt and Saudi Arabia, the far enemy was the United States. If you knock out the United States, according to theories of Al-Qaeda, you knock them out, they don't support Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Whether that's right or wrong is irrelevant. That's kind of their philosophy. And then the last thing that I think got overlooked, but some of you mentioned this, is Saudi money. This has an important reason why there was an increase in Islamic extremism. Saudi Arabia bankrolled many of these Islamic movements, going from Algeria to Indonesia to West Bank, Gaza, Hamas. If there was a mosque that was anti-American, that was preaching American hatred, there's a very real possibility that you found Saudi money behind it. They did this to kind of deflect from their own failings within their own government, and they used their oil money to spread their Wahhabist philosophy. Now, could there have been an Al-Qaeda without Saudi money? Possibly, but I don't think we would have had that hatred for the United States that was so prevalent prior to 9/11 that we saw. So just some thoughts of why I think Al-Qaeda rose. I think that the movie was pretty accurate. The one thing I would disagree was that there was a lot of emphasis on the Ottoman Empire and that causing Al-Qaeda to rise. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's, I guess, kind of the fun of it. Okay. Second question is homegrown extremism, and I want to cover this. This was, again, another week 2 question, and I apologize for going back, but I think it's important. Why is there a homegrown extremist threat in the United States? This is kind of a recent phenomenon where you have, between the Fort Hood shooter, the Times Square bomber, and other plots by U.S. citizens to actually attack U.S. targets. We didn't see that in the 90s or early 2000s, but we've seen that quite recently. And I think there's kind of 3 reasons for this, and some of you alluded to them, others of you kind of missed this. And the first is the rise of digital technology, social networking. You didn't have this in there. You didn't have Facebook, YouTube, Twitter in the late 90s or early 2000s. You do now. And what this does is it allows some guy who's pretty angry in Minneapolis to listen to a sermon by Anwar al-Awlaki in Yemen, and he becomes radicalized through that. He doesn't need to go to a camp. He doesn't need to get terrorist training. All he needs to do is see a YouTube video, get pissed off, and go engage in some sort of jihadist operation. So I think that is a primary reason for the rise of homegrown extremism. Other reasons, U.S. policies. I always suspected that there was dislike for U.S. policies among the Muslim population of the United States, whether in Iraq or Afghanistan or U.S. support to Israel. Then obviously, as Iraq and Afghanistan continued, the anger that many felt, the persecution or the perception of persecution was enhanced. And then obviously it was even more enhanced by social media sites. And then the third reason why we have a homegrown extremism problem is no one here really said this, but it was a decline in the U.S. economy after 2008. And while terrorism isn't always linked to economics, I think this is one case where if there's a massive decline, you're going to have more people pissed off, more people disenfranchised, and more people out of work. And that led to, again, a more animosity among U.S. citizens in conducting attacks against U.S. targets. So that covers week 2. I'm going to go ahead and skip week 3. I think we pretty much hit the head on why on the issues that we saw in week 3. Why the insurgency was successful. Why did it adapt? Why did Tamil Tigers adapt? I think those 2 documentaries were pretty excellent. And then just go to week 4. This week, terrorist financing. Unfortunately, this week kind of hits only the wave tops of the issue of terrorist financing. If you ever get to take a class on this stuff, on JWICS or by the CIA or the U.S. Treasury Department, take it, because it's very, very interesting stuff. It talks about how terrorists finance their operations, how they store their operations, how they invest, how they build businesses, how they launder money. All that stuff is really fascinating work, and I also think it's a understood, or it's a vulnerability that very few understand. So, or it's a vulnerability that we don't exploit very well. So I think that's, if you want to go deep into it, I recommend you do. But of course this week we just go hit the wave tops. And I look forward to what you have on the discussion sections. So with that being said, I appreciate everyone's patience in the last couple of weeks, and I look forward to hearing you in the discussion sections. You'll have the grades for this week posted out, and if there's any issues, please let me know. Have a good day.